get out of my clothes and I started posing. And just like with Sami's situation, he just started touching me inappropriately. He was grabbing my ass, pushing himself against me. He tried to kiss me multiple times.
So we're joined today by Sami and Tara. This is a very unusual episode. Welcome, Sami and Tara.
Hi.
So
Hi.
I'm not sure what kind of podcast this will be. Maybe it's my biohacking bodybuilding podcast, but actually for the audience to know, this podcast has been a long time in the planning. I think it's been a month and a half, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Probably a month and a half. And just for the audience to understand so this video is regarding a person named Hermandus. What's his last name?
Buckle, like a belt buckle.
Yeah. Hermandus Buckle, we call him the praying Mandus because of some predatory behavior that this video is mostly about. Now, for the audience to know, he's a photographer for the NPC. He coaches women and physique athletes. In fact, he's most well known for coaching Brandon Hendrickson, who he stopped coaching just before he won the physique Olympia this year. He also coaches George Brown, who had that altercation with Brandon Hendrickson at the Olympia, which is actually how I found out about him. Originally, Nick Trigilli and I were doing some coverage of Brandon Hendrickson and George Brown, and Nick and I covered it incorrectly. I got in contact with George Brown later and found out what in detail happened. And in speaking to him and Brandon, all these kind of different people, I think originally one lady reach out to me. Saying that she had a horrific experience with Mandus. And for the audience to know, I'm not a person who likes to take one person's word over another. So I'm very concerned about doing that in general. And also in the time we live in, as the ladies know, there is a potential for someone to be, potentially mislabeled, if they have an altercation with someone or something like that. So to make sure it was true, I posted a story on my Instagram asking, has anyone else had this kind of experience with Mandus? And I received in the end about 12 or more individual accounts from women who didn't know each other mostly. Tara and Sami know each other a little bit and they can talk about it later, but mostly they didn't know each other. And a lot of the stories, there was a varying range of the kind of, is it molestation or predatory, whatever it is. There was a varying range of it where some of it was less than others, but there was at least 4 or 5 stories with very similar accounts of what happened. And so when I saw those similar accounts, I started to believe this is a real issue. This is a person who's preying on women who looked not saying for sure Mandus, but I thought at the time, this is a person who's preying on women who are looking up to him for advice, for counsel. Some of them are not even women who look up to him. Some of them are just women in the gym with him, next to him, or in the locker room or elsewhere. There's so many different kinds of stories, but basically there's a lot of creepy behavior. And in addition to that, there's another level of it where it got weird, which is that in bodybuilding, there's a lot of coaches who don't know anything about biology. So there are coaches who harm people all the time. And unfortunately, I heard also about Mandus, people going to the emergency room, needing IV fluids because of damage he's done to them. He lost his own GI tract entirely. He wears a colostomy bag because he was unable to manage his health. So this is a person who, number one, doesn't know much about biology. And number two, is harming women. It's not about women, it's about weak. It's harming the weak around him, picking on people, doing things like that when he can get away with it. So I wanted to talk about it with Sami and Tara. And the thing is, not many people were willing to come and talk about it. These were the brave women that were willing to risk their personal reputation to talk about it. So thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I'm very grateful. So I want to look at my notes just to make sure. Yeah, one other thing I want to mention is that, people in life can change. So some people can do horrible things in their life. I have done, other people have done, but you can change your life and become a better person. And if Mandus had been doing this in his past and had changed, we wouldn't be talking about this. But unfortunately, most of the reports lead up to a very close time. Like it seems that he has not stopped. I'm almost certain. And the final thing I want to say before I let the ladies speak is that I spoke to Mandus also. So before I made this video, I spoke to George Brown, who's his client, and I asked George, I told him I'm going to make a video about Mandus, have Mandus call me so I can verify everything about him. So Mandus called me within an hour or two, and he called me many times that night, actually. And the first time he was a bit rude, so I shut the phone in his face. Called me back again an hour later or so. Or no, he called me back immediately later. I started speaking to him, and we stayed for an hour or so on the phone. I asked Mandus every single question that you could potentially ask him to find out his innocence. I am personally 100% convinced that all of this stuff is true. I'm personally 100% convinced. I asked every single thing I could. I gave him every opportunity. He was the creepiest person I've ever spoken to on the phone. Literally, I felt like I was speaking to a pedophile. I even told him this on the phone. I told him, look, because I heard someone say something. One of the accounts was like, you almost raped me. I was like, look, I'm going to tell you something. You don't sound like a rapist to me. And I heard every story, but you flirt with people like a pedophile flirts with people. This is a molestation kind of weirdness about you. And I told this to him on the phone, and I told him, I'm going to say this in public also. And I gave you the opportunity. In fact, I asked Mandus because he had some excuses. He was like, hey, he had a bunch of excuses like, I have a wife, a girlfriend. I've been with her for so many years. We know the story about his girlfriend. He is actually always cheating on his girlfriend with these chicks. But he told me that. He told me a bunch of excuses. And every time I told him, okay, should I give these excuses when we do the podcast? Should I tell people what was your response? Because I'd be glad to do that for you. He's like, no. Please just don't say anything. So he knows what he's into. He knows the situation. So go ahead. Maybe who would like to speak first? Sami, would you like to lead us since you've been sort of taking a lead on this in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense because mine kind of leads into Tara's. So, I guess how detailed do you want me to go?
Well, I mean, just enough so that people understand the kind of character. I mean, yours was a horrific and traumatizing experience. I don't want you to go back through the trauma because I know the first time you told me it was really difficult for you. But if you can just, he's a predator. You can just describe it.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, he was a member at the gym that I went to. I was powerlifting. He wanted to recruit me for his bodybuilding team, Underground Athletes, and wanted me to do kind of both because I always said, oh, I powerlift, I don't bodybuild. He was like, well, you can still do both, just change up or add some things to your routine. So he would like sporadically check in on me. One day offered me some advice and pulled me into the women's locker room where he decided to touch me inappropriately and had me cornered.
This is while he's with his girlfriend, by the way, just because Mandus's excuses and with his,
Yeah, so he had a long-term girlfriend who was also a member of the gym who I knew. And, I just thought he was trying to be nice and help me. And instead he was just kind of trying to get a feel.
Yeah,
the owners of the gym did allow him in the women's locker room frequently. So it wasn't like super weird for him to have gone in there. That's where he did most of his consults with his female clients.
Oh, by the way, Mandus was very specific about saying that gym has a posing location in the center of the gym where everybody can see, and he never goes in private with anyone. So how could he have ever had anyone pose with their bikini or whatever and gone behind them? Because, by the way, for the audience to know, a lot of the stories are the person is posing and Mandus goes behind them and the lady feels, his phallus. It feels his phallus behind her. And this is the creepiest part. And I heard that in three or four stories. So, but he always says, I'm never in private. So how did he get into that bathroom? That's interesting.
Well, the other thing too is that, I don't know about now because right after this happened, I canceled my gym membership there. But Chicago Barbell Compound did not have a posing section in 2017 when this happened.
Wow. I didn't even know that. Well, he was really adamant about that. Because
there was no posing section in there. We were in the locker room and it was like a bathroom sized mirror in the women's locker room. It was probably like 2 foot by 3 foot at the largest. It was just a small mirror on the wall.
And after this happened to you, we'll talk about the gym in a bit, but after this happened to you, you did speak to the police and you took it to court and he was found guilty.
That's correct.
Now, the funny thing is, Sami and I had been speaking before I talked to Mandus on the phone, and I had misunderstood her, thought he was found not guilty. So when I was on the phone with him, I told him, Mandus, you did go to court and you were found not guilty. What I know is in California, if you're alone with a girl in a place and she says you did something, you're going to jail, especially if you're black. He's half black, he told me. So I said, you'd go to jail. So you're found not guilty. So that should be a defense for you. He didn't correct me on the phone. He just stayed quiet. It was so weird. He was like, and he just went quiet. And then I realized later, I talked to Sami again. No, he was found guilty. So, yeah. And his defense was just that if you didn't want it, you would have left.
Correct.
In reality, you felt intimidated.
In court, his attorney said, well, you didn't fight him, so you clearly wanted it. Now, he's cornered me, and he's much larger than me. I'm not a trained fighter. And they tried to use the fact that I worked in retail as an excuse to know how to handle a situation. But in fact, retail teaches you to not be responsive. If someone throws a punch at you, you just let them hit you. If someone pulls a gun on you, you do whatever they say. You're cooperative. So I'm like, why would I fight you?
Interesting.
I've been trained to cooperate.
Interesting. But it didn't go, I mean, in the end, it awkwardly ended, right? Where he realized that you were not going along with it.
Yeah. So in the end, I found a voice, and I got really stern with him and basically told him, like,
Tara, what was your experience in brief, without traumatizing yourself, obviously?
I just want to start off and say, like, I've forgiven him. So I'm not here to, like, for a smear campaign or anything like that. This happened to me, like, back in 2018, and I had, like, made peace with the situation. And I really do. I don't hate the guy. I've totally forgiven him. And I just want to come out and say that. Now, going forward, why I wanted to do this video is I just believe me going into bodybuilding, I was extremely naive, whether it be with coaching, people around me. I always had great experiences at shows or working with photographers. So when I would meet someone new, I always had the same understanding, like, oh, like, they just really want the best for me, and they just really want me to help me out in the sport. So the reason I want to make this video is I just believe there are people that don't want the best for you, and don't be naive. And I just feel like any female going forward into bodybuilding, I do feel like they need to be careful. And it's not saying anything against the sport of bodybuilding. I still bodybuild. So I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that as a female, you need to have your guard up, whether that be with photographers, coaches, like you were saying. It's not as glamorous as you think it is. And maybe one good experience doesn't mean that all of your experiences are going to be good. So that kind of leads me into my story about what happened to me. So I'll try to be brief about it. But it was at 2018 Nationals in Pittsburgh. I was coming out of a car, walking to my hotel room, and Mandus was outside. He stopped me actually outside the hotel room and be like, oh, like, why aren't you staying at blah, blah, blah hotel? And I was like, well, you know, I'm staying here. And he just kind of goes in to, like, start, like, do you know who I am? And I'm like, no, I don't. Like I said, this was only like my 4th competition. So I didn't know who he was. I was like, well, have you ever heard of Maximum Muscle Report? And I was like, oh yeah, like, you guys report, you know, news media. And I was like, of course I've heard of that. He's like, well, yeah, I'm the head of that. And he's like, I have so many pros. I have so many connections. Basically kind of like, if for females, if you're out there, he's basically baiting me. So he was like, I just came out of a client's hotel room and just went to check on them. I was telling him, like, what I was competing in. He asked me to pull up a video of my routine, this point competition I was competing in fitness. And he just kind of goes on to say, like, oh, like, wouldn't you do better if you were just, like, a little bit leaner? And, like, obviously, and I want to say, like, in this sport, we're supposed to be strong women, right? We're supposed to be tough, the toughest of the tough. But when you get to the point where you're depleted, you're at nationals, you're insecure, whether it be about your physique or if I'm good enough. It's a whole bunch of judging in this sport. So I know people can relate with me with this. When you're at nationals and you're at one of those big shows, I don't care who you are, there is insecurity in you. So he basically preyed on that, like, insecurity of mine, like, just kind of talking about, oh, like, your hamstrings need to be more developed, which totally agree. My hamstrings need to be more developed. So he's like, would you mind if I, like, just came up and, like, kind of gave you pointers? And I was like, again, going back to being naive, I thought everyone was out to help me. And so I was like, yeah, like, I would love that. Like, you know, I'd love to know your inside. So basically when we got into my hotel room, now I was alone at this point. My friend was coming to join me maybe a day after this. So I was alone. And that he did kind of ask me that when we were downstairs too. He's like, oh, like, well, is your husband up there? And I was like, no, my husband's not going to come to this show. He had to work, couldn't get off work. So we get up into the room and he asked me to change into a posing suit. And I'm like, well, I don't have one. Like, I'm doing fitness this year. I was like, I didn't bring it. And he was like, oh, well, you can just wear your underwear. It's fine. I do this all the time. So obviously I've always had male coaches. I've never had a female coach. So to me, that wasn't quite abnormal. And I know now I'm going into major detail, but in bodybuilding, bringing people in and out of your hotel room happens a lot, whether it be makeup people, tanning people, coaches, everyone comes in and out of your hotel room. So I know people are going to be like, oh, well, she invited him in. Yes, I did invite him in on the premise that he was going to give me pointers and he was going to look at my hamstrings. Nothing beside that. I just wanted to say that. So I did get out of my clothes and I started posing. And just like with Sami's situation, he just started touching me inappropriately. He was grabbing my ass, pushing himself against me. He tried to kiss me multiple times. He like threw me over a counter and was thrusting me.
Which, by the way, that's also in other stories. The 18-year-old or 19-year-old, she was also thrown onto the bed, and the same. There are a lot of commonalities in all the stories, just for the audience to know.
Yeah. So, and he was just saying like, oh, you'd feel so much better if you slept with me. You'll do so much better tomorrow. And if you slept with me, just kind of pushing like you need to sleep with me, basically. I finally did get him out of my hotel room. I was like, oh, just give me your number. Like, we'll just exchange text later. And I was just like, just give me your number. Just trying to get him out. So we did actually exchange numbers so I could get him out of my hotel room. And then like 2 seconds later, he texted me. He's like, I can't wait to be your coach. I did not respond to that. And the day of the show, he actually sent me other multiple messages, just like kind of outrageous. He started saying like that I was unstable. And I'm like, dude, I haven't even responded to any of these messages.
Yeah, I noticed that about him. He's like that. He'll start to he's very manipulative. I actually told you guys that he's like a con man, huh? He's a little bit of like, he'll mess with your head. I saw that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was like, I don't want to be your coach. I think you're a little unstable. And I'm like, responded
exactly.
to your messages. You're a psycho. And I would guess that my actual experience of reporting my incident was not that great. As soon as it happened, I called my family. I called everyone that I was close to that happened. And I emailed Sandy and the NPC about my experience as soon as it happened. Honestly, Sandy was super helpful. She told me she wanted to meet with me, and she did meet with me the next day. She told me that I needed to go to the police, that he was like a private contractor for them, that she was not sure what she can do about the situation, but go ahead and go to the police. So I did go to the police. This is where the story gets very interesting. So I report my incident to the police, and they honestly want nothing to do with it. They come, they take my statement, they give me like a little number and say like, oh, you can check on your case, blah, blah, blah. I heard nothing. So I contacted them, I think. Yeah, I contacted them and I was wondering like what was going on. And they said, at this further time, he's out of state. We can't really pursue it, blah, blah, blah. 2 days later, they called me back and they were like, oh, did you tell anyone about what happened? And I was like, I just was like, no. They were like, well, were you in contact with him? And I was like, absolutely not. And they're like, well, his lawyer called here. Wow. And I was like, oh, that's weird. He's like, yeah. So then all of a sudden they started taking me seriously. Right. So they were like, oh, I'd never seen someone's lawyer call without us they didn't even file charges against him. Dude's lawyer just called them. And they were like, I've never seen this happen before. And I was like, well, innocent people don't just have their lawyers call police stations when no charges have been pressed against him. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, that is really weird. So then I felt like they kind of started taking me seriously. They sent me to, I don't know, I think I told Sami about this. I think they sent me to like an advocate's, like a victim advocate's something. And they really did. They tried to help me after the whole lawyer situation, but still like nothing really came of it. I was working with a lawyer for a little bit, but when COVID happened, the case kind of got dropped. So I haven't done anything with it up until right this second.
That's really fascinating. That his lawyer. So that was after what happened to Sami, right?
Yes. And that's how I got into
He's ready. He's got a lawyer.
Oh yeah, like that's the thing is like he was ready for it. No one, I don't even think anyone had said anything to him.
That's
and
unbelievable.
Unless I don't know.
So in my experience, he potentially has friends maybe on the police, because I know like the owners of Chicago Barbell Compound, they had a copy of my police report before I even contacted them.
Yeah.
So I mean,
let's talk about that gym for a second, just for the audience to know. So there's all the stories revolve around this gym that he used to attend in Chicago. All of the women, over 10 women that sent me their stories, they revolved, well, some were in hotel rooms and stuff like that, but all were about this gym. And they were all upset that the gym would never get rid of him, because all of the women reported him to the gym because they felt, it's like a hostile environment. So they never got rid of him. Interestingly, when Nick and I began digging into this subject a month and a half ago, something happened after I talked to Mandus, and a couple of weeks later or 3 weeks later, he was banned from the gym. So now he's persona non grata at the gym once we started digging into it. I also wanted you guys to know, one thing you mentioned, Tara, this idea of you being skinnier. Apparently he has an obsession with skinny women. So this is another thing I heard from other women. He's obsessed with being very frail or skinny or lean. Another thing I wanted to mention is that the IFBB does indeed know, and not just Sandy. We, in order to make this video, I made sure that everybody in the IFBB knew that I was making the video and they were okay with it. And hopefully we can get this guy to not, at least either he changes his life and becomes a priest or something, which would probably not be good for him actually, but either he changes his life or he stops hopefully doing this photography stuff and stops getting all these clients that he's messing around with. So that's the point of this. And it's not just about him, just like Tara said, it's not about Mandus. It's really about stopping this in general. So my impression, being not a bodybuilder and someone who was into arm wrestling and powerlifting, was that these bodybuilding coaches, I always felt like they were being a little bit selfish with their female clients, because they were giving them androgens sometimes that made them feel great in the short term, like these CrossFit girls that look great when they're 22, but maybe when they're 30, they'll feel much worse about it. I didn't know that they were also potentially sleeping around with the girls or pressuring them and doing all that kind of stuff. So, I wanted to bring this to light for the audience to know that there are bodybuilding coaches who prey on women around them. Praying Mandus is one of them. Maybe he can be the first one and they can name the rest after them. So you could say, oh, your coach is a bit of a praying Mandus. That could be a phrase people use in the future to catch these kind of people. By the way, when I was on the phone with him, I really tried my best to understand this guy. I gave him I even told him man, some women, I know you might think that the woman is playing hard to get, but she's not. So sometimes, and you can't tell if she is or not. So you just don't do that. I even try to talk him through this, but he's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done that. I've never touched a woman inappropriately. I'm with a girlfriend. We've been loyal to each other for 6-7 years. This has never happened. So he has a blanket denial. It's a total lie. I guess we covered sort of everything. Do you guys have anything else that you want to say to, I mean, my audience isn't many women. Hopefully you guys can maybe promote this with women so women can see the episode. But do you guys have any advice you'd like to give to younger women who are weightlifting and want to avoid what you went through?
Sami, do you want to go?
Yeah. So basically, I honestly would say just don't be alone with someone. If you're getting help from someone, just don't be alone with them, because that, unfortunately for women, is where you are most likely to get in trouble. Because for me, if I had put my foot down and said, no, you can help me in the middle of the gym, I honestly don't think he would have done what he did. He can't get caught that way. But I allowed him to get me in private where there were no cameras, and it was a Sunday night. So the odds of someone walking in were pretty slim. So really just be aware of your surroundings and just don't be alone with a man. Even if you know him, because I know some people have had good rapport with him and then he's done things they try to build your trust.
Yeah, because your case was truly predatory. You're not his client. You have nothing to do with the guy.
He buttered me up for 6 months getting his trust. So.
And Tara, you gave some general advice also. I think it holds well.
Yeah, I mean, when the whole thing went down with when you posted on Instagram, I think I reshared it to my story. And I've had over maybe 20 girls say that this has happened to them. So
You're
I know
like
you've got 10, but I've got more. The thing is, and it has happened like within the last 6 months. So it's not like he has stopped this. I think the biggest thing to put off, like I just want him to stop. Like, I don't know. I don't want anything, you know, he needs to stop. And I don't know how that's going to happen. Obviously with Sami, with me, even with these other girls, and people are like, when it comes back to like, we're supposed to be like in bodybuilding, we're seen as strong, independent women. And I feel like that's a lot of reason why some women have not come forward, because it makes them look weak. And I just want to say that you're not weak. Like he knows what he's doing. He gets you just at the right moment. He knows exactly what to say. And most of these experiences have happened around big competitions, whether it be women's pro debuts, his clients even that have been with, like you said, people that have been with him for years. I'm not going to speak on anyone's behalf. I'm not going to mention names, but I know someone that has been his client for multiple years, and it just happened to her. So I'm not saying that maybe people have had good experiences with him, and I don't know, but everyone that I've talked to has not had a good experience with him, especially as a female. I don't know what else advice to give, to whether just to stay away from him. And I, like you said, I don't know what the NPC or IFBB is doing about him, but just stay clear of him. Like whether it be, even if it's like a media press, even anything, like have someone there with you.
Yeah. And guys, just so for everyone to know, I mean, you can find steroids wherever you want them in the US. You don't need anyone to give you steroids. Read under the lines or between the lines, the audience, if you need to understand that. Mandus is not a good coach. So he doesn't know anything about biology. I mean, imagine getting your diet from a guy who lost his intestinal system because his diet was so bad. I mean, that's not where you should be thinking. So this guy doesn't know anything about biology. He's a creep. And so there's no need for this guy at all, you know, and you can find, for the guys, you can find your drugs elsewhere. You don't need to go to this guy. So really, but basically what we're trying to say is the guy knows nothing. He's so creepy. I mean, for the audience to know what these girls just said doesn't even touch like 5%.
It really doesn't.
It really doesn't. The audience is going to think this was like, we made a big deal out of nothing, but trust me guys, there are stories, he's so creepy. And like, even the complimentary stuff, he tells women like, oh, I really like skinny women. And another one will be like, oh, you know, my dad is black. I'm half black too. Like he does different flirtation things for each person. And it doesn't, anyway, it's very, very, very creepy. So in the future, guys, also just for everyone to know, in the day and age, I know there are some women that like that kind of thing of the hard to get stuff, but in general, guys, don't think that there are women, everybody is just playing hard to get to you. It's not like that. Women on the street aren't all playing hard to get to you, and you should never press yourself on a woman past some, you know, if you feel that she's not interested, you back away. You don't keep going forward. That's the way it should be, I think.
Yeah.
But also too, like if a woman, you know, if you offer a woman advice or help and she accepts it, that doesn't mean she's being flirty. That means she wants the help and appreciates the gesture. Like you can be nice to a female and a female can be nice to you, and it doesn't mean to make a move, you know.
In fact, in my opinion, it's even creepy. That's really creepy. If you want to approach a woman, you should just be direct. You shouldn't be trying to like work with them or, you know, end up their coach in a superior position or their boss. And then you try to get them. Don't do all this kind of creepy stuff and underhanded stuff. Yeah, I agree with you. Well, I'm sorry for what you two went through. And I really appreciate you both coming on here. And guys, just for the audience to know, they're just on here to help others. You know, nobody wants to be on here to talk about this. So I really appreciate you guys coming on, and I appreciate you telling the truth. And Sami, especially, I appreciate you helping me to learn more about the matter from the top down.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us. I appreciate you giving me a platform to speak on, and I hope that this gets out there and that other men and women can kind of learn from this, and hopefully no one else has to go through anything like that. Whether it's with Mandus or someone else, just hopefully no one has to deal with a bad situation.
Exactly. All right. Thank you guys so much.